It was a shift in mentality. I remember it so clearly of like, oh, wow, this is how rich people think. It's very different than normal people. And it was, every single interview was shocking to me because it was just a different way of thinking.
On today's episode, we have the founder of RealWealth, Kathy Fettke. Steve, Kathy's story is an amazing one. She's somebody that, whether or not you're in real estate or not, you've probably seen her. You probably have heard of her. She's regularly on Fox News or Fox, CNBC, CNN. She's got a couple podcasts. So she's a well-known person. But I wasn't as familiar with her story, and I won't give it away. But there's tragedy at the beginning of the story, but then there's this rebound that she has. And one of the things that stood out to me was the tragedy that you hear about early in the episode didn't hold her back, but it actually created the platform, so to speak, or a launch pad for her and her family to take off. And I love that she took what she knew. She took what she had and she made it work. And that was just such an encouraging story to hear about Kathy.
You know, Jake, when she was interviewing wealthy people and what it took for them to be wealthy, she was looking out in the future and trying to develop a plan of what it's going to take to get there. And with any business, with anybody, entrepreneur, whatever you're doing, it's critical that you can find that mentor, someone that's further down the road from you that can help you, lead you through the maze to get to where you want to go with your strategy and vision.
Yeah. And so this episode is incredible because it's not only encouraging, but it also gives a great roadmap for somebody who wants to change what their life looks like. If they don't like where they're at now, or they just want to be in a different place in the future, whether it's financially or the work they do, Kathy really lays out a roadmap that everyone can follow. That includes starting with the things that you know, the things that you do, surrounding yourself with the right people to bring you along and to learn from. But let's head west. Let's let people get to this one. Stay tuned as we discuss creating freedom with passive income, the power of your network, and where to invest your money today with our guest, Kathy Fettke. This episode is brought to you by Skyline Point Capital. If you're anything like me, you're always considering where to invest your money. Stocks, bonds, crypto, and rental home, the list is literally endless. As we've all seen over the past year, the stock market is unstable, the housing market is just weird, and inflation is on the rise. In times like these, the clear place to invest my money is in multifamily real estate, aka apartment complexes. Here's why. Returns on real estate investments have little to no correlation with the stock market. There's lower volatility, stable income streams, and the tax benefits are insane. And let's not forget that the apartments will typically appreciate in value over time, which means you can walk away with a pretty nice return when the complex is sold in 3 to 5 years. Best of all, multifamily investing is passive, so you get all of the benefits without the hassle and headache of your typical rental home investment. Getting started has never been easier. Head to skylinepointcapital.com to learn how you can start investing today. Kathy, we are super excited to have you on. Being a listener of Bigger Pockets, and Steve and I are constantly watching the news and market updates. You're a name that we're very familiar with. Your face we're very familiar with. So we're so excited to have you here today. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I typically what we do is we always start at the beginning of people's journey through life and through real estate and business. So I want to take us back to your beginning in real estate. And you're fairly well known for being a real estate investor and for having your finger on the pulse of the marketplace and for training and educating people. And you have a business that's centered around that as well. But I'd love to start with how you even got into not only real estate, but just the profession and the life that you find yourself in today. And I'd also like to know, what were you doing before real estate? And then how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. My background was in broadcasting. I worked in newsrooms in San Francisco at CNN's where I started, and then went to Fox and then ABC. So I loved that business. But when I got married and we had children, it was just the hours were insane. Sometimes I had to be at work at 3 a.m. and sometimes there till 2 a.m. Not all in the same day, but just weird hours.
Yeah.
So when we had children, my dream was to be a stay-at-home mom, to be able to raise them. And at the time, Rich had become a motivational speaker and a business coach. So he allowed me that opportunity. I kept a radio show on the weekends to be able to stay connected to the industry and because I just liked it. But right around 2003, when he was on a book tour for his book, Extreme Success, on how to have a 4-day, not 4 hour, 4-day work week,
Yeah.
have a 3-day weekend. We didn't go as extreme as 4 hours,
right.
but that's when he saw a freckle on his forehead that was unique. He's a redhead, so I have no clue to this day how he knew that one was special.
Yeah.
But he had it checked. It turned out to be melanoma. The doctor thought after further tests that it had spread to his liver. And in that case, the doctor looked at him and said, "You may have 6 months to live."
Wow.
So that just obviously rocked our worlds. Here I was living my dream. We had just bought our first house. It was way too big. We were kind of doing the American dream of overspending, growing too fast. He was making a great income, and we were doing all the things that our investment or not our investment counselor, but our financial planner had told us, putting 10% of our savings, away, 10% for emergencies, investing 10%, all the things. We would meet regularly with our financial planner. But when you have a glitch, to the plan, something like this, where suddenly, he didn't want to work, he was on a treadmill that if he got off of that, then our lifestyle stopped. And here we had a $4,000 a month mortgage, which today is maybe normal in California, but back then was probably closer to 10 grand a month.
Yeah.
So like I said, we had too big a lifestyle.
You went for it.
For not having the backup plan.
Yeah.
So that is when I had to just figure it out. It was like, it came from a place of love. Like, this guy needs to take 6 months off. If the doctor's right, he needs to spend that 6 months doing whatever he wants, not working. And it just motivated me to figure out how to do that. And having been a stay-at-home mom, boy, it's hard for women who haven't been in the workplace to get back in it. But I did have this radio show, so I just thought, I'm going to use that. I do know how to do that. And I started interviewing people to find out how they built wealth, and specifically passive income, because I wanted to be home with the family during this challenging time. And that's when I started to learn about the incredible world of real estate.
Yeah.
That's where it all started.
Kathy, you were talking about overcoming adversity. When the first company I bought, within 3 months after I moved my family from Kansas City to Omaha, it got hit by lightning.
Oh.
And wow. 80% of the building burnt down. I mean, This was my dream. This was my launch. I had one customer, one product, one building, and 80% of it burnt down. And you can understand that dilemma. What do? We got to eat that song. You get knocked down, you get up again, and you just have to figure life out, because life's not easy. It's things happen.
And oftentimes we do need to get so uncomfortable that we change things, because it's easy to just do what you've always done. And, that's just what you know. Oftentimes, that moment of, oh my gosh, I've got to figure out something different. It was so powerful and so transformational, because all I could do was focus on that and nothing else. I refused to believe the doctor. It was this like 100% commitment to covering, not just covering our expenses, but being wealthy. We had never had extra, because we were in a lifestyle where if we had extra, we would upsize, that's what we did. And so this was like, what would it be like to actually have extra money and to have enough that he could be home and just get off that treadmill. So the 100% commitment is what makes a difference. And it's hard to get there when you're too comfortable. Really.
Yeah.
That's why tough times can be the best time to create something new.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, how's Rich today?
He's healthy, and I always forget to add that to the story that
Yeah.
he is healthy. They fixed everything. They cut out the melanoma, and he he has it checked. He kind of has a spot every time he goes, but
Yeah.
20 years later, he's fine. So
Yeah.
thankfully, the doctor was wrong. But it
Yeah.
is what prompted both of us to create this new world, and that's how Real Wealth was born. And 20 years later, we have 70,000
Wow.
members. We're still
Oh my
helping
gosh.
Yeah.
Did you, I imagine not, but I'll ask anyways. Did you ever imagine that like a traumatic event like that? And my mother had melanoma too. And, it was early enough that it was like, hey, you should be able to recover from this, but you never know. And so I can empathize with that experience that you just don't know how this thing's going to pan out. But did you ever imagine that such an event like that could flourish into now this life that you have, where obviously Rich is doing well, so amazing, but also you have realized that that dream of building passive incomes and now educating people on that. Like, was that ever a thought in your head, or was it just I'm in survival mode now because of this?
We had met in a personal development workshop. So we learned some really key things in that, which one was to be very clear about your vision and to create those dream boards that people sometimes laugh about, but to, put the images on your wall that you can see every day of what you want, and slowly have your subconscious accept that idea. Because oftentimes what we don't have is something that we're not familiar with. Even if it's something we want, our subconscious doesn't know how to have that. So if we haven't had wealth, or we haven't, had the things we want, there's often something blocking it, where that like blind subconscious that's stuffed in there somewhere, it just feels, it recognizes what's familiar and wants that. So we have to retrain it. And that's what we did. So in answer to your question, we did. It was on our vision board. I actually pulled out, when we moved to Malibu, I was pulling, out the boxes and going through them. And I found this diary, and it opened up from the year that we met, where in full detail, I described that we would live in Malibu overlooking the water. We would rock climb, we would surf.
Wow.
And we were friends with celebrities. It was like out of the blue. I'd never been to Malibu. We didn't rock climb. We didn't surf. We didn't know celebrities. It was so weird.
Yeah.
And then 20 years, not 20, even like maybe 15 years later, that's what we were doing. So again, it's kind of like retraining this part of ourselves that absolutely creates what our subconscious sees. Not so much what we want in our mind, but what, this part of us that has more power than us, but that we can't even see, we don't even know is there. So the more we can, get to know that subconscious, what runs it, and what it actually is thinking it wants. I know this sounds really woo woo, but it's
I mean, Steve and I will agree with that. I mean, we're big proponents of obviously goal setting and building a roadmap for, you see the future you want. We know, like, let's take Skyline Point Capital, which is the business we run. We have a vision for what it can be and what we want it to be. And so that's kind of like your vision board. Like, this is what it's going to be. But then also, what are the steps to get there? Because my 1-year plan or my 20-year plan, that's a ways off. Yeah. I need to have something tangible to work on today, whether that's, make 3 calls today to people you want to learn from or pitch to, or so it doesn't sound woo-woo at all. It sounds very practical of how to get the ball rolling to see the change that you want in your own personal life.
And it really, really literally comes to retraining your subconscious to wanting really to be in alignment with that vision, because otherwise it will reject it every step of the way. And I remember when I would do kind of a deep visualization, or write, journal, because I can get kind of into a trance state when I journal. The things that I wanted, I would suddenly hear like a voice in my head, or like a feeling that was like, oh, you can't have that, or you shouldn't have that, or, oh, if you have that, you could fail, or you could lose everything, or you could, all the things, all the reasons that the subconscious will shun it. And you have to listen, like, oh, okay, wow, thanks for that thought. Well, here's how I'm going to handle that. Because I remember my big one was, oh my gosh, what if we lose everything? And that would be a conversation I'd have with Rich. And he would say, well, what's the worst thing that would happen if we lost everything?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. He goes, well, maybe we could live in a van and just surf all the time. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good.
pretty
All
awesome.
right. Well, then that's not so scary.
Yeah. That's a great perspective.
Kathy, what did you learn about yourself in those 15 years after you were putting the vision board? Did you learn anything good or bad?
Well, it was many years ago. I mean, we do it every year. We are constantly updating the vision and doing the dream boards, and every year it's a ritual we do with our family, actually, because we want the family to be involved in it too.
Yeah.
But this all happened before. Like, this was the year we were getting married. So before all of this, when we had gone to this personal development course, and what I learned then was that the power of my thoughts. That's the bottom line. That and there's the famous saying, if you think you can do it, you can. If you think you can't do it, if you think you can do it, you're right. If you think you can't do it, you're right. And again, as simple as that sounds, really, we've got to pay attention to what we're thinking. If we're thinking, oh, in this market, I'm never going to find a deal, then you're right. But if you're like, oh, in this market, I'm going to find amazing deals, you're also right. It's like your thoughts are super powerful. And I realized back then my thoughts were not very I don't know how to say it, but like I had more of a scarcity mindset.
Sure.
Where I didn't think there was enough, and I didn't think we'd be truly wealthy someday. There was this doubt or this belief that if I was, well, then I wouldn't have real friends because they would want what I have. They wouldn't really like me. They would just want my stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
There were just these negative thoughts, and it says that we have to pay attention to those and kind of work together with those thoughts to overcome it.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the mind determines what you do. And I relate that to, I used to do Ironman triathlons and been to Kona. And if you listen to what the Navy SEALs say, that when you think you're done, your body has 40% left in it.
Wow.
And I found that with doing Ironman triathlons, when you think you can't get there, you just keep on going. But it's a mental game. It's an absolute mental game. It's usually the brain gives up before the body. And you are so right.
And it starts there. So, that's the first place people should start, because there are so many ways to make money in real estate, or just to make money. There are so many ways, but without that mindset, you'll lose it. I don't know if you guys saw the Beanie Baby movie, but it was really wild. What happened to him. So I recommend the movie. Mindset is everything.
Yep.
So with that, I was back then, that was 2003, like I said. So I used my radio show platform just to interview people. I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was like, hey, they must know something I don't have. People who have created wealth, especially that weren't born into it or weren't trust fund kids. Like, how did they do it? And I just started interviewing one after the other. And it did change my mindset. It changed all those negative things I was hearing in my head too, like, oh, wealthy people aren't generous. And then I'd interview these people and find out, oh my gosh, they're the most generous people in the world. They're donating more than I make in a year, an entire year. Or I would, just the more I spent time with people that I hadn't, known before, that I hadn't been around, the more those little voices in my head just disappeared. And I'm like, okay, I want this. I want this. And so I also was lucky enough to interview Robert Kiyosaki, because I was on a pretty major station in San Francisco on KNEW and then KSFO. So I was able to talk to people that would never talk to me normally, know? And it was Kiyosaki that really brought us the foundation of how we would invest. Yeah. And I remember back then it was 2000, probably by then it was 2004, maybe 2005. And this is when, of course, the credit bubble was happening and anybody could get a loan. And, he could see what was so obvious, but that so many people couldn't see, was that when anybody can get a loan, but they haven't qualified, but then the payment adjusts, well, that's going to be problematic. Yeah. And it was very clear when that date was going to happen. There was no mystery around it. Those loans were going to reset, starting in 2006, then 2007. That was going to be massive after that. So he said, these people are not going to be able to make these payments. It's going to blow up. So get out of the storm. Like, you can see it coming. Just get out of it. Out of all the bubble markets, get out of all the places where prices have gone up 40% every year because of this easy credit, and get into places where the lending was a little stricter and where the prices haven't gone up in value. But the 3 points that he left me with on that interview that I use to this day is follow the population, so migration, got to understand that. So follow population, follow jobs, and they go together generally. And then where it's still affordable, because if you've got people moving in and jobs moving in, but the prices are stable, that's where you're going to kind of see the tide raises all ships sort of thing. If the whole area is growing, so is your investment.
Yeah.
We've used this since then. We went through the Great Recession, and those properties, we followed him to Texas. Basically, he said, sell everything in Nevada, California, Arizona, Florida, and get into Texas where the fundamentals are there. Even in 2005 and 6, at the peak of the bubble, the fundamentals were still in place in Texas. So we followed him. We bought properties. We kind of learned how to do that. And those Texas properties fared well through the entire largest housing crash since the Great Depression. Those rents actually went up because we bought in the path of progress in the Dallas area. So that, kind of put me on the map as being able to understand markets, how to invest out of state, what to look for, how to set it up with teams. And then our phones started ringing off the hook with people saying, well, I want to do what you did. And that's how Real Wealth Network was born, is helping other investors, by sharing our contacts, our resources, the teams that we use. And that's still our business today.
I want to come back to 2 things that you said that, you briefly touched on, but to point out how significant they are is the first one you touched on was you and your family sitting down and doing planning, like whether it's a vision board or goal setting, that's a family affair and not a individual affair. Now, you should have your own individual goals, but how they roll up into the family goal is incredibly important, because this better than anybody, is that whatever profession you're in, but especially in the real estate investing world, your spouse and your family are closely tied to what you do in investing. And so having them be part of the overall goal setting is so important, but it's usually glossed over. People don't usually set a family goal and they don't incorporate it. But the other thing is the change of mindset in part came to the change of the people in your atmosphere. As you, part of that's your own work that you're doing yourself, whether it's self-help and books and seminars, but part of it is the people that you surround yourself with eventually bring you to a higher level of either thinking or acting. And so you got people like Kiyosaki around you and, these high net wealth people and successful people and generous people. You're naturally just going to become like the people you hang out with. And those are 2 things I think people discount to their own detriment fairly regularly.
100%. You hang out with people you want to be more like, and write down in clarity the things that you want. Too often, we'll do an exercise through that is like, what are the top 10 most important things to you with the, put what's most important at the top. And usually, of course, it's, health, it's family, it's your spouse, it's the things that matter. It's our why. Yeah. And then the next column is, okay, how much time do you, where does your time go? Starting with the top where most of your time
usually
goes.
Invert.
It's like all the stuff you care about gets this much time generally.
Yeah.
Whether it's your health or your family or your, travel or whatever. So like they say, put the boulders in first, put the rocks in first, and then everything else will find its way around it.
It's really good. It's a great analogy. So I'd love to hear, you've talked about with your radio show, you were able to get an inside track with people like Kiyosaki and other high-performing individuals. And I know you were probably picking out best practices from each one of those, and that probably helped train you and lead you into what you're doing now. And obviously with Kiyosaki, it led you to Dallas and the way of investing. But was there a commonality of trends or best practices that you saw with these individuals that you were interviewing on your show that kind of created the foundation for you and your practice going forward? Did any come to mind?
I mean, absolutely. Yeah, it was It was a shift in mentality. I remember it so clearly of like, oh, wow, this is how rich people think. It's very different than normal people. And it was every single interview was shocking to me because it was just a different way of thinking.
Mm.
One was, definitely investing in assets that produce cash for you, whether it's a business, whether it's real estate. There's only one of you, and you only have so much time, and it's fairly limited, especially when you want to put those priorities in place, then you have even more limited time. So for you to truly build wealth, you have to have money working for you when you're not working, which is what we were learning is like, oh my gosh, if you get sick, what are you going to do if you're dependent on your hourly wage?
Sure.
What are you going to do? You're not working, you're not making money. So that was kind of the common thread of whether you're investing in a I don't know, a laundromat or, just any kind of business, a self-managed business that you've trained everybody how to do it. And now you don't have to show up. Or real estate. Real estate seemed to be where all the money would end up for these wealthy people, that all the money they would get from their businesses or from their jobs would end up in an asset in real estate, which was the most passive. Because all you do generally is collect the payment. If you've got a good property management in place, the hard work kind of comes in the beginning where you've got to know how to pick that asset and make sure it's, with a company that will manage it well for you. All that comes at the beginning. And if you get that right, then it's pretty darn passive. So that was the big lesson of, there's just no way that I can build wealth with my time. It has to be through other assets or other people or employees or whatever. You'll just never get there. You're never going to make enough money unless maybe you're an actress or someone making tons of money.
Tech CEO.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but even CEOs learn to hire people so that they don't do all the work. And that was the big one is you got to learn this thing called leverage. Otherwise, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough to get there with just yourself working.
Yeah.
So that, real estate made a lot of sense. And at the time, this is when I learned the passivity of real estate and like, oh my gosh, I get it. Remember I said we bought that massive house?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, we buy this massive house and now we're stuck with this payment. But because it was so big, it was kind of almost a blessing that we overbought. Because there was an in-law unit downstairs and there was an office downstairs. And then there was another room in the back that had a separate entrance. And the whole upstairs could be kind of separate from that. So Rich, when he found out this bad news and he went rock climbing with his buddies to just get, feel better, he came back to a rented out house. Like he went away for a week, came back to a fourplex. And I'm like, sorry, honey, but this is how we're going to get through this.
Yeah.
And I was able to get like $1,200 for the in-law unit and like $800 for the little office and then another like $600 for the back. And that covered most.
That's brilliant.
It was like so awesome.
Yeah.
And I got stuff on Craigslist and, like garage sales and stuff to furnish it. And that was when I learned to be a landlord by accident. I was literally getting the tenants on Craigslist that I didn't know how to do background checks. It was crazy. I could tell you some stories.
You lucked out there. Yeah.
Do you even remember Craigslist?
Yeah.
So, we kind of learned, like, as weird as this is to have strangers, not really sharing our space, but we had to kind of tiptoe around the house because we were on the upper floor. And as annoying as that was, it was like, oh, but this is amazing. They're covering most of our home expenses so that we can sort of relax and get through this together without having to worry about that mortgage payment.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the house is going up in value by about $100,000 a year because it was
California.
during that housing boom. So it's like, wait, we're making $100,000 a year. Someone else is paying. This makes sense. I get this. It wasn't. It just was like, oh, I get this. Provide housing for people who need it. They pay you. Then the bank, for some reason, lends you the money, and then the government gives you all these tax deductions. Like, okay, let's do that.
How do we repeat this?
Yeah. It was just mind blowing because like buying businesses, that sounded harder to me. Like, how do I figure out how to do that? Even, the laundromats. Well, sure. That sounds like passive, but not as easy as just buying a place and renting it out and having a property manager just manage
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And you got to know the industry, and you've
Yeah.
got to have some sort of, aside from cash, got to have some sort of value that you can bring to increase revenue. And that makes a whole lot of sense. Let's, I want to touch on Real Wealth. And, you've talked about how Real Wealth started when you started taking action in your own life. And then you had people who were, passively viewing you and saying, whatever you just did, I want to do that as well. Can you please teach me? I'm probably paraphrasing there, but so you start Real Wealth. What does that process look like? Did you start with just education, or did you start with investing and bringing people along with you, or did you start with I know mindset and habits and things like that sounds like they're important to you. Did you start with that, or was there kind of a roadmap?
There were a couple. The first was right in the very beginning. I needed cash right away, and most of the time with real estate, it takes a little while for that. Like you're not going to get it right away. And oftentimes you need to have money to buy assets. If you don't have money, then you've got to find ways to to negotiate and get deals and seller financing and all that, which I didn't have a lot of free time. So I was like, well, gosh, how do I get money now? And I had a radio show, like I said. So I thought, well, sponsors. So I ended up getting a sponsor back then. Remember, mortgage brokers were, they were making so much money hand over fist because they could give anyone a loan and make 2 or 3 points on it,
Yeah.
And I'm in California. So $1 million loan is going to be $10,000 for just handing someone an application. I mean, that's how easy it was back then.
Yep.
So I called, every mortgage broker I could. I ended up getting one. It was really hard. I got turned down by everyone. I went down the phone list and, nobody was interested. And I thought, well, gosh, I'm just kind of basically calling saying you want to sponsor my show. They don't know anything about me. I need the next present, I need the next phone call to be something they can't refuse. So I call and I thought, I'm swinging out, man. I'm like, okay, how would you like to be the co-host, or how would you like to be a regular on my show? And he's like, oh my gosh, the guy who answers, just some random person I found in the phone book. He's, I was just thinking I would like to have a radio show. Like, great. He goes, when can you come to my office? I'm like, how about today? I show up with this whole presentation of how I was going to have him be a guest, even a co-host. And the co-host would be, wow, this would be the biggest price tag, but he could just come as a guest. Well, he chose the co-host position, wrote me a big check.
Wow.
We had some money. But I came home and looked at Rich. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just sold my soul. I am now doing a mortgage show. And Rich just starts laughing. He's like, oh yeah, you just lost your audience. He goes, but what if you don't talk about rates because no one cares? What if you just interview his clients and find out what they're doing with those loans? I'm like, oh, that's really brilliant.
Yeah.
So I tell him that, and I call my new partner loves the idea. So that's really where kind of things changed, where I started interviewing his clients and learned the power of leverage. They were getting loans to buy multifamily. They were to buy rentals or to buy a home and live in it, fix it up and sell it in 2 years and get all the upside tax free. There were so many things they were doing that I was learning that I had never heard of. And even interviewing people who were retired by the age of 30, I'm like, okay, this is incredible. It was from those interviews that the phones rang off the hook from people from our audience who wanted loans. So my co-host was like, man, this show has been more successful than I could have ever imagined. I can't keep up. Why don't you become a mortgage broker and help me? And he pulls 3 checks out of his wallet, one for $10,000, one for $11,000, one for $12,000. He's like, I just made this today.
Wow.
Okay. So I ended
Mortgages sound more appealing now.
Oh, yeah, they're not fun now to do. But I got my real estate license. I became a mortgage broker. Now the show had a benefit to me where I could now have clients. I became one of the busiest mortgage brokers in the San Francisco Bay Area because of that. But what was even more helpful, I mean, our financial problems were over like then, so the whole thing was successful. But what happened is I was now kind of a celebrity in San Francisco in the real estate space where I was really new to it. And I started to get invited to speak at real estate investment groups. And I was just appalled. I would go to these events and I would be like the keynote, or, that I'd be there on stage, and I would listen to these people just selling products for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. I talked to them afterwards, and their integrity was just, it was just icky. And I thought, oh my gosh, there isn't a safe place for people to learn. It's just always someone trying to sell something or push something. And I came home, looked at Rich and said, we need to start our own group where that doesn't happen, where you're not allowed to sell anything. It's education only. And this was kind of before podcasts. This was a long time ago when this didn't, it's 20 years ago when that didn't exist. The only reason you would have a real estate investment group was because you'd have some speaker, and the club owner would get half the sales. That's how they made their money. And I thought, well, I'm a mortgage broker. I'll make my money just helping people get loans and helping them build a portfolio. That's what'll be the benefit. So that's when RealWealth started, was really out of spite in a way, just kind of disgust. Like I wanted to be the opposite of the gurus, so to speak, and have a safe place for people to come and learn.
Yeah. And it's since grown to, you said 70,000?
70,000 members.
Wow.
Then I had Kiyosaki on. Then he, again, taught me to sell everything in California. And I could see it. I was giving people loans that shouldn't have them. Like they would come in every year and they would refi just to pay off their credit cards. That was kind of what people did. It's like, oh, just, run up your credit cards and you're going to save a bunch of money if you just refi, cash out, pay those off. Yeah. I was like, this is something wrong with this business.
Yeah.
And I knew there was a problem, and I knew that people were lying because I didn't have to verify anything. I didn't have to ask. It was just, I'd give them an application. They would fill it out. No verification needed. And I turned it into the bank. And that's how it was done. So it was like, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why I believed Kiyosaki. And that's why we went out, Rich and I bought like 5 properties in one day in Dallas.
Because like residential or multifamily?
Those were single family because it was a great entry point of it was easy. They were new. They were in growing markets in Dallas. They were like $140,000 brand new and rented for $1,500, and I could get loans, no money down. You could get an unlimited number of investor loans back then with no money down.
Wow.
Crazy.
Those were the days.
Those were the days, right? But that also, then I learned, wow, okay, these are new homes. They just got rented. Someone's paying off my mortgage. It just can't be this easy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure enough, 2008 happened, and then we found out really it wasn't that easy.
Sure, yeah. Well, to walk us through that. So 2008 hits. What happens? What do you learn in that moment, and how do you pivot from that?
Well, I was really, really proud of the thousands of people I helped avoid disaster, because I would have people come in and, they'd want to buy a $400,000 duplex in Stockton that maybe the total income was going to be $2,000 a month or something like that, or less. And I would just go, why are you doing that? You could buy in Texas, and if you're spending $400,000, you'll get, $5,000 in income. Why would you settle for like a really C-class rough neighborhood, maybe D-class, $400,000 unit that doesn't cash flow? Like, this doesn't make sense. So I helped so many people avoid disaster. And like one lady in particular had 3 old, disgusting properties. I helped her sell those. And she had about $1 million. We could 1031 into really nice properties in Texas. When the crash happened, the properties she sold were worth about 20% of what she sold them for. Woo. Whereas the properties in Texas actually went up in value. So someone like that, she could have lost $1 million in a month, in 2008 when everything went down. And instead she preserved her wealth and grew it. Yeah. And those were the kind of stories that I could repeat over and over again. And what probably got me the Goldman Sachs Award of most intriguing entrepreneur, because I had helped so many people just avoid that. They felt nothing, no pain whatsoever during the Great Recession.
Yeah.
At least in their real estate. Whereas I did not listen to my own advice and kept 2 properties in California. Yeah, the one that we bought that I turned into a fourplex, we kept because it was a fourplex, quote unquote. It was really just one house that I turned into, 4 units. And then we bought another house because I wanted my kids in a really nice school district. And by the way, remember, 0 down loans.
Sure. Yeah.
It was really easy to get that. So I had $2 million properties in California. And, by the time the market crashed, they were worth half that. So it was a tough time, tough lesson. Like, oh my gosh, I should have just listened to myself.
Yeah.
I helped all these other people avoid disaster, and here we were. So yeah, big lessons learned. Like, take your own advice.
Yeah. It takes that though sometimes to reset and to remember, oh yeah, I need to get a little to fall down a couple times to remember where I should be.
Absolutely.
So you talked about, RealWealth is 70,000 strong. And you've already touched on that. The truly successful people find a way to delegate and to free up time, buy back time. So I'm curious, how do you spend your time today? I'm sure that you have freed up a fair amount of time to spend with family, and I'm sure you're, still doing radio show and podcasts and whatnot. So what is like a typical day for you now that you've started to implement these sorts of activities that free up time for you?
Yeah, I mean, I get to do what I want, and what's my, my purpose, I guess you could say, is I do love to teach, and I love doing the podcasts. I love helping people who maybe felt as hopeless as I did back then, not knowing what to do. I've run into so many people at events who said that information has changed their lives. So I get to do my unique ability. And like you said, I get to, really spend that time with family. I've got a grandbaby. I've got another grandbaby on the way. And, be able to live life the way I want, which is a dream. That's the best answer.
Yeah.
I remember in 2008, I had, built this business that was just booming. I couldn't keep up, and I didn't really know how to run a business. And I was working probably 12 to 14 hours, and I would still manage to be home when my kids came home from school. But then I would work all into the night after they went to bed, always working. It was crazy, but that's oftentimes how businesses get started. But then in 2008, I was at a breaking point, and that's when I begged Rich, who was a business coach, to help me. And that's when he came in and started to just kind of look. He's like, "Oh, okay, you need help. You're doing everything." The first thing he did was to create an org chart, which I didn't have. I was just doing everything. I had hired a bookkeeper. I'd hired a couple people, but I didn't really know how to train them and stuff. So he takes the org chart, and normally you've got the CEO, you got the COO, then you've got the finance department and the marketing department and the product and so forth. And on that org chart, it was my face everywhere. Everywhere except for a couple. And that's when he's like, okay, this is the process. You just one by one replace yourself with whatever task it is. And ideally the one you hate the most and that you're worst at. That's the first one, go after that, which is why I got a bookkeeper. It's like, I'm not doing that. So, bring in someone who knows how to do that. Then the next one was, okay, well, we have too many people who want to talk to me. I need to train someone on being an investment counselor. So then, hired that, and then an event planner. And it just, now today, I'm not on the chart.
Yeah.
I'm on the
Fired
board
yourself.
now.
Yeah. You got fired from every position. That's the best way.
I got fired, and I have to say it's weird. It's hard for an entrepreneur. I remember there was a time where I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Everybody took my job. There's a little feeling of loss because, you built it, and it feels weird that you're not needed anymore. But then that's when you get to go back to that vision board. Sure. Like, what am I really here for now? My time's freed up.
Kathy, and as entrepreneurs start bringing in people in their organization, that's not an easy task either. Yeah. And finding the right person. I remember back in my early days, I wanted to hire a controller. And I didn't want to spend $5,000 more a year to get the better controller. I wanted to save the $5,000. I won't tell you what that controller cost me, but it was a lot more than $5,000 if I would have if I would have hired the right person. And ever since then, it's like, I want to hire A players. I've got to hire people that are better than me, that know what they're doing, and they're an A player, not just somebody to fill a spot. Did you ever have that struggle when you were hiring people?
So many times. The stories I could tell you. Oh,
It's like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
I'm just terrible at hiring people. I'm really bad. And then I learned that you could actually hire someone who hires people. That's kind of the COO's job. If you're just not good at it, which I'm honestly not, because I do believe in people, and I more positive. So you need someone who really knows what to look for in hiring. So I don't do it anymore. We did. Let's just say, like, one lady we hired for events. So one of our clients had to go, I don't know if you noticed, but at the bottom of her email signature is a page where you can hire her for certain other services.
Oh boy.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So I don't know if you could top that story.
Yeah.
We all have stories like that. And Kathy, when with our investors, and when we're doing presentations and talking to people about real estate investing, we always talk about the plan C. What do you do if your income is based on the number of hours you work? And when we talk to them, there's like a light bulb that goes on. Mm-hmm. It's like, I never thought of that. What happens if I can't go to work? And I'm the sole breadwinner. And for every hour I'm in the office, that's how I get paid. And it's so cool when you see their eyes light up and go, oh, there's another way.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the same thing when you talk to people?
All the time. Yeah. Because we're really not trained to think any other way. The idea is that if you put away 10% of your income, that by the time you're 65 and you've invested it properly, or had a financial planner invested for you, that you'll be set. But I don't think you can make that. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Not with today's inflation.
It's helpful, but that's
helpful,
it.
But not. So people aren't taught. And fortunately today there is a lot more information out. But when I started, there wasn't. It was a secret. It was something that wealthy people knew how to do. But most people, you go to your job, set aside some money if you can. Otherwise, you're living paycheck to paycheck, which is what most people are doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting when Steve says Plan C. We talk about cash flow. Cash flow is now, thankfully, especially passive income, cash flow is such a buzzword that people are starting. You can see their antennas start to move when they hear it. And I don't remember where I heard this. I can't reference it, but I had heard that or read that the average truly wealthy person has 7 streams of passive income. Mm-hmm. And because if one of those, like your primary one, drops off, okay, the boat doesn't sink. It might have taken on some water, but you're going to be okay. And when you have those conversations of cash flow, people start to say, you know what, I can think of a few different ways, whether it's real estate or freelance this particular skill set I have, or like the person you hired who had that little thing at the bottom. But yeah, you start to see that light bulb go off of all the different ways that they can create cash flow, which creates opportunities, like Kiyosaki says, to buy back your time, to create freedom of time and space and money as well in your life. Yeah.
I mean, it takes a while to get there. And I don't like to mislead people in thinking that you can create that overnight.
Sure.
I mean, unless you get an inheritance or something. Like, we had one woman come to us and she inherited this old building. She couldn't even rent it out in downtown San Francisco. And she's just sitting on this thing. She heard me on the radio, and she's like, I've got this liability. It was really liability. She inherited this old building she didn't know what to do with and couldn't rent. And I'm like, honey, sell it. Like, what? Yeah. Just because you inherited it doesn't mean you need to keep it. She thought she could sell it for $1 million, which, hey, you know what? Great. She ended up putting that on the market and getting 1.6 million.
Whoa.
There was another problem she had suddenly, which is now what? Do I pay 50% of that to the government, or do I 1031 exchange it? That's the power of our network at RealWealth, is we've got teams across the country who've got products, so we can do 1031s fairly easily. We were able to get her like $2 million worth of property, and she was cash flowing $20,000 a month, like overnight. So there are ways, to be able to cash flow. But for the average person who's maybe just starting, it might not be right away, but you have a plan. You have a plan. Okay, I'm going to buy a property this year, then I'm going to save money and buy a property next year. And then maybe that first property has increased in value enough that I could take some cash out and use that to buy the next. And, to really have a plan. And what I would tell people is that if you, at least in single family, if you can buy one property a year and then take all the cash flow to pay off the first, you could be sitting on all those 10 properties paid off by year 15. Now you've got a plan. Now you've got an asset that's growing with inflation, because property tends to inflate, so you're not getting drowned by inflation. You actually got an asset that grows with it, and where the rents are growing with it, so that you in 15 years can be comfortable. Now that I've been in business 20 years, we have so many examples of people who followed that plan and it really worked for them. We have others who were able to accelerate it a little bit faster because maybe they took their IRA, self-directed it and invested it in real estate, or they took out money from their home. If you can start with a chunk of money, or if you have the time to do, to find deals on your own and get seller financing or something, there's ways to do it with less money. But if you have a little bit of money, it's going to take longer. I just want to be transparent about that. But then you have a plan, and everything changes when you have a plan. When you don't have that plan, it's scary. You have no idea how you're going to pay for college or pay for your aging parents or yourself, But when you have that plan and you can see it on paper, and it's like, okay, I just have to save enough money this year to buy another property, and then I'm on track for my plan, and then hope makes all the difference. Without it, you're just floundering, you're just living, like I said, paycheck to paycheck, like everybody does. If you know that there's a goal, then it's like, oh, maybe I won't take that vacation, or I won't buy that new car. I won't, because I've got to stick with this plan, because I know this plan's going to work.
Right. Yeah. And without a plan, you blink an eye and 20 years has passed by.
Oh my gosh. That is truth. I can
right
attest to
that. Okay, we're coming up at the end of our time together, but I want to spend the last few minutes, however much you're willing to share. You're frequently on the major media outlets now, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and you're frequently talking about what's going on in the marketplace today, real estate, just because you have your finger on the pulse. I'd love to hear your take on what you're seeing in the marketplace today. What are you seeing and hearing? And then what do you see in the next 6 to 18 months, and how people should respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, a year ago when I saw that, the Fed was completely wrong about inflation. I don't know how they got that so wrong when you print $7 trillion and think there's going to be no consequences for that, and at the same time shut down the economy. So like no goods are being produced, but money is circulating like crazy. So you have all this money chasing a limited number of items. It's just like, it was obvious. But anyway, they got it wrong. And when we saw that they were going to dramatically raise rates, we knew what that meant. And for me, that meant, you got to read the tea leaves, right? You've got to know what's coming. That is a key skill for real estate investors, for any investor, but to really understand what's coming. The way I interpreted the headlines, and remember, headlines are meant to scare you, and they're not always meant for you. So, if all of a sudden the headlines are like, oh, mortgages are getting more expensive, everybody's priced out, that's one way to look at that. The other way to look at it is, oh my gosh, we have a lot more renters. How do I fill that demand? So as soon as I knew that 25 million people were going to be priced out of owning their homes, I started a single family rental fund, because it was like, now finally, we're not going to have all this competition. We're not going to have 50 people bidding on one house. We're going to have nobody bidding on that house. Now it's a buyer's market. Now is the time to buy, not when It's a seller's market, and people get that wrong all the time. They buy in a seller's market, they sell in a buyer's market, they pay too much or they sell it for too, just don't go with the masses. So to me, the minute I saw that, I thought we're going to go against the grain. I'm going to start a rental fund when no one else is buying. The deals we've been getting are insane, and we're buying in this part. Another thing that's happening is reshoring. We have the Biden administration passed a chip manufacturing law with, I think it's like 72 billion. I don't have the number in front of me, but to bring chip manufacturing back to the U.S. And one of the areas that they're targeting is North Texas. I know the North Dallas area really well. I've got a property manager I've worked with for 10 years there. Together, we started this fund where she's got wholesalers coming to her with deals at ridiculous prices because nobody else is taking them, because other investors have loans. They have to pay double-digit loans. Numbers don't make sense. But as a fund, we have cash. We're getting these deals for almost nothing. We're fixing them up because now you can get a contractor. You couldn't get one a year ago.
Sure.
So, and renovation costs are down and material costs are down. So anyway, go against the grain. That's all I could say.
Yeah.
See what other people can't see. And when you've got millions of people priced out of the market, they still need a place to live. That's the piece people missed. Where are they going to live? They have to live somewhere. Yeah. And it could be on the streets, but most people prefer a roof. So it's going to be apartments. It's going to be affordable homes. Yeah. And that's the market we're in. We have been so active at a time when existing home sales are down 20%. We've been busy because I teach investors this. This is the time you're not competing. And then the fear of interest rates. Now that existing inventory is so limited because the lock-in effect, that again, the Federal Reserve didn't see that one coming. They thought that if they raise rates, home prices will come down. No, people still need a place to live. And there is a bubble of first-time home buyers. When you look at demographics, there's this bump right now of 30 to 40-year-olds who are forming families. Huge household formation, people getting married, having kids, the largest generation ever from age 30 to 34, first-time home buyer age. There's nothing for them because you have homeowners who are locked into, I think 70% of homeowners are locked into rates under 4%.
Yeah.
They're not leaving that. So the idea that there would be a housing crash is ridiculous. Nobody's selling. The market's locked. And homeowners are in the best shape ever. This is not 2008 where they were on adjustable rates. And when those rates adjusted, they couldn't afford it. No. 10 years later, you fast forward, these are people who qualified. They had to put money down. They had the best credit ever. And they're locked into low payments. So the people living in homes today that own homes have the lowest cost of housing ever compared to income. They are in the best shape ever. They are not in trouble. The housing market is not in trouble.
Yeah.
Who's in trouble are people who don't own homes. Their rents are going up. Their costs are going up. That's the problem. And as business owners, we can solve that problem. We can provide housing for them. We can build it. I'm starting a build to rent fund. We can, find old buildings and fix them up and make them nice places for people to live. As long as you keep it in that affordable range. And I don't mean like low income housing. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the average person in the area can afford to live. And when we can provide that much needed service, the demand is there. So you compare that to the commercial real estate world where many loans are on adjustable rates. Most commercial loans are. Commercial real estate may go through what residential real estate went through in 2008. And we're seeing that with a lot. Commercial real estate that's on fixed rates should be fine. But anything on adjustable, it's challenged just the way that residential was because those payments are changing and it's really difficult. So, if you can get into an asset with a fixed rate, if you can acquire a multifamily property that, acquire their fixed rate loan, you're providing opportunity when you could provide housing. It is the most needed thing.
I love that. Well, I think that's a great place to end our conversation on a high note. Hey, Kathy, if people wanted to look you up, to be in contact with you, where can they find you?
RealWealth.com. It's free to join. We still offer free education. That is our thing. It always will be. We have over 500 webinars there where you can learn about asset protection and leverage, and you can get connected to teams across the country who can help you acquire real estate. They have property management in place to make it simple for busy people. That's our thing. And then to find out about my rental fund, it's growdevelopments.com.
Love it. And as somebody who's consumed Kathy's content, highly recommended. Check it out. And until next week, appreciate you guys listening to Heading West. And Kathy, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Kathy.